Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here with another comic book countdown. My comic book thoughts, not reviews, really. Want to point out, as always, that this is just a countdown in this case, from 1 to 11, or 11 to 1, 11 being my least favorite, 1 being the one I got the most pleasure from. Just ranking them by the amount of enjoyment I got out of each comic book, not whether you should enjoy it or not, really, or which is really the best comic in some kind of critical level. It's very personal to me and personal to the time that I happen to read them, because I definitely got a lot of comments from people who really liked a comic, Collider, that just did not hit me right. But I tend to give you some thoughts. When I say comic book thoughts instead of reviews, it's because I feel like I can just give any random thoughts I feel like about that comic book. Rather than, in my mind, review means something more formal where I have to fully cover it, which I might occasionally with an issue here or there, but I don't feel responsible to fully cover things. I just give my thoughts, say what I think. Or whatever thoughts float up to the top of my head as I show you the comic book. So coming in there were no comics this week that I didn't find pleasure in some level or another. So that should be said too. And so it was kind of tricky ranking them, especially since there were only 11. There were no clear losers and there was a bunch of winners, so to speak, but those were kind of close, and there was a certain difficulty in distinguishing between those two. So anyway, I decided to put at number 11, the lowest level of pleasure I got from a comic book this week was Batman Detective Comics number 1008. In a sense, it was kind of almost an entry-level Batman versus the Joker kind of story. And probably at that level, it was a very good story, or a very fun read. But it for me, there wasn't enough of something. The Joker is such a familiar character to me. Batman is such a familiar character. There wasn't anything here to get me super excited. It was kind of fun that it took place at kind of a Coney Island type of amusement park type of place. But that seems right on the nose. That's exactly what you'd expect from the Joker. So it's kind of a Joker versus Batman comic that's exactly the way you would expect it to be. The art was pretty cool by Doug Mahnke. I wonder if we're going to keep rotating through artists. So if we're going to see Kyle Holtz again, and if we're going to see Brad Walker again. So there's been very, very good artists on this Batman. But maybe the stories are a little more basic than one would hope from Peter Tomasi, who used to do a good solid superhero story and then add a layer of other stuff on that's maybe missing right now. I can't decide whether maybe I should drop Detective. It's not a bad comic most of the time, but it's not wowing me. Maybe I just need a break from so much Batman. I chose not to jump on Batman White Knight, even though I enjoyed the first Batman White Knight series, because I just feel like I just didn't feel like more Batman right now. And that's a series I can pick up and trade when I do feel like Batman, or pick up in back issues. So, and then the other factor, which probably also made me reduce my pleasure, is every one of these Year of the Villain, the Offer comics, I'm now figuring out the last 2 issues of each of them will have a thing where Lex Luthor shows up in the form of this little mini flying saucer that will then project a hologram of him in his new kind of weird cloaked form, kind of the ghost of Lex Luthor, and he will approach a bad guy and initiate making a deal with them to come be evil with him. And so that's kind of predictable, and it's like, does that apply to next issue's Batman Detective Comics? Do I want to read it? I don't usually like events, and I have kind of tried to make a rule of just avoiding them to make myself a happier comic book reader. So, and it seems like a waste of 2 pages of story for me. And that might be, knowing that he had to stick in those 2 pages at the end, no matter what, that might be why the writer, Tomasi, decided to make just a very simple story, basically an 18-page story, 1 and done. Sorry, very thirsty. So, coming in at number 10 is Invisible Kingdom. I officially dropped this from my pull list after the first 3 issues. This is issue number 5, the end of this arc. On a whim, I picked up issue number 4, despite my disappointment with the first 3 issues, and that was actually kind of a better issue. Mostly, I think, because it gave the artist more to do. And there are some cool moments here where the artist, Christian Ward, doing the colors and all the art, color and elsewhere, gets to do some really cool stuff. In other places, it seems, I don't know if I'm finding the pages I felt like he was maybe being kind of lazy and not really doing his best work. Nothing terrible, though. I mean, even his less good work is still fun to look at. I'm trying to find a page that didn't wow me. A lot of these pages did wow me. There's kind of a cool one. But I don't know, it feels a little more Photoshoppy and a little less painterly than at least my memory of his best work. Let's see. There's scenes with these spaceships where they just seem like constructs made in some kind of graphics program and plugged into the comic book. You know, maybe some program where you model things for animation or where you model things for videos. So anyway, still, I had fun reading it, but it still hasn't given us a reason to think that this little controversy that the characters are involved in is such a big deal. You know, oh yeah, there's payoffs between a corporation and a religion, but what for? And why? I mean, that's not good for. It's kind of a little smirch on the image of each of them, but not horrifyingly bad, really, as far as I can tell. And in fact, there's a scene in here when they do release the information to the public, to the futuristic version of the internet. Everyone goes, so who cares? So what? And yet they still are going to be killed by the evil corporation, and they somehow survive, and somehow they're going to go off and have adventures in some other zone of space, I guess. So maybe all of this was kind of a setup for a motley crew on a spaceship who will go off and have adventures. Is that what happened here at the end? I'm not sure. That doesn't tell us much about the title, Invisible Kingdom. There was a moment in this book where she was praying, this sort of nun of the Invisible Kingdom religion, and I thought maybe her prayers were going to yield something and that it was going to tell us something about the power of faith or something like that. But as far as I could tell, it did not add up to that. So I don't know. I guess this is going to continue on past this arc. I'll probably listen to whoever's doing videos or podcasts where they're discussing whether this gets better or more interesting. Maybe this first 5 issues was the setup for where they really want to go, and where they really want to go might be more interesting to me than where this comes from. But time will tell. I say I'm not going to... I got single issues beyond the point where I thought I was going to. I'm saying now to myself I won't get single issues from this point on, and wait and see how it goes. But we'll see if on a whim I do something differently. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur continues with these one-shots and with these oddly digital 3-dimensional covers. But with interior art that I like. But somehow Brandon Montclair, the writer, doesn't work for me as well in shorter one-shot stories. I guess there's 2 one-shot stories that I'm shooting down here, even though generally I like the idea of shorter stories. But I feel like Brandon Montclair does a better job at, like I said last time, with 4 issues, 5 issues length stories. This does have that surreal, dreamlike quality that I'm coming to expect from a lot of his stories, but without, I guess it's the magic of her seeing through time glasses that makes whatever happens. how Devil Dinosaur suddenly shows up at the third grade or fourth graders field trip at the museum. I'm not clear how that works. I guess that's not too important. And then he seems to be in love with the skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which, if you think about it, is odd on a number of different levels, even if he can feel love for a specific Tyrannosaurus. So maybe in some future issue we'll revisit this idea that there's some Tyrannosaurus Rex off in the past that Devil Dinosaur loves. I don't know. It was kind of a weird one. I mean, a giant T-Rex being in love with the bones of another T-Rex. Yeah, didn't quite click for me. But still has that fun. There's something so fun about the Lunella Lafayette, the Moon Girl character, that I got some pleasure out of reading it. Doctor Strange is kind of a mixed bag for me. This is yet I think the penultimate issue of this, what's it been, like 5 or 6 issues story arc about Galactus going into the magical dimensions and then starting to eat things and absorbing magic and science. And it's been written, by my estimation, more by Barry Kitson than Mark Waid, and then drawn by Barry Kitson, or breakdowns by Barry Kitson. I think it's breakdowns, and then finishes by Scott Koblish, which gives it in many ways, a very 1980s old school Marvel look, which I have not enjoyed as much as I thought I would. But it's not bad, and actually I enjoyed the art quite a bit in this issue, a little more maybe than in earlier issues. I think the artists were really having fun with the big battle scene with Galactus that takes up most of this issue. So that was really fun to look at. I came into the issue feeling kind of already tired of this series, but then I enjoyed the big explosion, so the fireworks of the big fight done in this older school Marvel style. Sort of like 1980s Marvel, but with wilder coloring. So that was all for the good. And then, yeah, so it was pretty good. And then I guess, well, I don't want to spoil the end that will lead into the last issue. Even though it's something shocking, I didn't find it that shocking, and I don't find myself deeply caring what the results are here. It just doesn't. The hooks of this story did not get into me that well. Partially because the way the story unfolded, it was too much. I don't know. I want to say too much telling and not enough showing, but it was more something a little different than that, but along the lines of that kind of problem. So I had put Doctor Strange at number 8. Moon Girl was number 9. And in at number 7 is this first issue of Valkyrie. Especially initially upon reading this, the first 5 or 6 pages, I was particularly disappointed, and I'm like, this is what we get from Jason Aaron and Al Ewing as two really hot Marvel writers, and it just seemed very generic to me when it started out. But I think, in a way, in its own way, it was kind of like an old school Marvel story, because it begins with a big fight scene with some minor criminals that the hero takes out, which is only to lead into the bigger story that's going on here, which turns out to be pretty cool by the end. And I guess for people who haven't seen it, I won't bother spoiling it. But I really liked who the bigger villain turned out to be with the weapon that he has gotten his hands upon. So I think, thinking about it more, I realized these kinds of scenes of an opening fight scene with some kind of silly group of supervillains who don't really have a chance against the hero, I wanted it drawn by some really old school Marvel artist in that style, like Sal Buscema or John Buscema or John Romita Sr., that just, would have really fun kinetic action. The style of this artist, my daughter looked at this and loved this style of this art, but to me it was kind of static. So the old school Marvel, there's just sort of the joy of the action because it was all based on the incredibly kinetic Jack Kirby template that everyone was working on. So they just did their best to make every panel really pop with the action. And here, this artist is kind of, or this team of artists really, because there's a line artist and a color artist, and as you can see, the color is a big part of what we're really looking at. Their goals and what they're doing as artists are very different than that kind of old school Marvel. So I grew to appreciate this art flipping through it after having read it with my daughter, and she liked it. But I still think, for me, with this kind of story, I like the bigger actions, the bigger emotions. I guess there are emotions on these people's faces, but they're kind of muted and such. So it might have ranked higher. I'm not sure if Al Ewing in particular has some kind of more interesting quirk up his sleeve to go with this, or if this is just Aaron and Ewing just sort of sitting back and taking it easy in a sense. And the thing that I loved the most was we discover that Valkyrie has kind of a death vision where she can see people's deaths over their head. So over these two guys, they're tiny little black dots, and then it gets bigger over this older guy who's not eating well. And this homeless guy has a really big death's head over him. So when it gets bigger, you can see a death skeleton. And then, this is a little spoilery, over Heimdall, there is a gigantic sort of death dot that she sees and tries to warn him about, but too late. Luckily, characters never stay dead in Marvel or DC Comics. So Valkyrie, by the end of reading Valkyrie, I warmed up to it, and it helped that I looked through it with my daughter, and I hope my daughter reads it on her own. So coming in at number 6 is Justice League Dark. And Justice League Dark has been possibly my favorite DC book, and kind of for me, this is the alternate flagship book for DC. Instead of the Justice League or Batman or Superman, Justice League Dark is what is keeping me really interested in DC Comics right now. It's my entry point. And unfortunately, so it had a pretty good story with different art style than usual, but it was kind of fun because they were this issue is kind of one of those pausing moments between major storylines where there's a lot of discussion of the helmet of Dr. Fate and Zatanna's father and John Constantine Hellblazer. Gave me a different view of John Constantine, and I'm not sure if I totally like it as kind of a pawn of Zatara, perhaps. But anyway, it was a quieter issue, but pretty cool. Didn't have as intense art as I've come to expect from this series, but I assume that's just for this rest issue. And then, because it's Year of the Villain, The Offer, we had a chapter 3, which was just Lex Luthor coming along. Lex Luthor coming along in his little hovering, could almost be like the same page in Batman Detective Comics, but this time he comes to talk to Cersei. And it's a little more interesting because he's asking her to create a evil counterpart to the Justice League Dark, a magic evil league, which he calls Magic Legion of Doom. But then they say next month, the Injustice League of Dark. So I'm kind of intrigued by that, but also irritated to realize, okay, next issue may be fully part of Year of the Villain, which probably means we're being further sidetracked from whatever real plans James Tynion, who's been doing such a good job, has for this group of heroes. But so that's why it came in at number 6 rather than at number 2 or something like that. Guardians of the Galaxy surprised me. I wasn't too excited when I saw this bloody paw, and I think I saw somewhere that we're looking at The Death of Rocket Raccoon is the new series, although the title of it is actually Faithless. And that's what I thought was really cool about it. It was the religion of Magnus coming from the future and invading the present of the cosmic present of Cosmic Marvel. And I thought that was really cool. And I really liked the very strong, throwback, not throwback, callback, that's the word I want, callback to the whole early saga of Magus, I think it's Magus, and Warlock from Jim Starlin. And someone else pointed out that it kind of resembles a little bit Dreadstar, who fought against a giant religion in a big cosmic thing. So it does, and I don't think I would have thought of that on my own, but I think that was Gregor Black who mentioned that maybe. Anyway, it was quite cool. The entire Nova Corps gets destroyed. Apparently that happens a lot to the Nova Corps. And yeah, I just like this issue quite a lot, just the way it unfolded. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this story. But it almost seemed like a weird insertion at the end. When we are, so this is a bit of a spoiler if you haven't read this issue yet. The last page is a reveal of an incredibly sick, looking on his deathbed, Rocket Raccoon. Maybe has cancer. Is that a callback to Captain Marvel dying of cancer under Jim Starlin? I don't know. I found it jarring because it just sort of appeared. It didn't seem like part of the rest of the story that we've been experiencing, which was really interesting. I also liked that this involves Peter Quill's father, and I'm intrigued to know. I'm a bit confused between the movie and bits and pieces of Star-Lord I read, decades ago. So I'm not sure what his relationship with his father is at this point, but I'm a bit intrigued by that. And so anyway, this is looking to be a very cool story. I'm not particularly looking forward to Rocket Raccoon wasting away or dying of cancer, but I'm sure it won't ruin the whole story. And by ruin, I mean just make it more depressing than I particularly feel like going into. Freedom Fighters comes in for me at number 4. This has also been one of my favorite DC series, and my only real complaint about this is I miss the Eddie Barrows art. This had really great art from Eddie Barrows. Now we have, I assume, a fill-in artist of Redondo. He does a good job, definitely good, but I came in with that desire for the same very intense Eddie Barrows art. So it's kind of like substituting a A-level artist for a B-plus level artist, I suppose. But the main thing is just the change itself. If this guy were the regular artist on the comic from the beginning, I don't think I'd have any complaints. But yes, quite a bit of cool stuff and interesting use of, I think her name is Phantom Lady's power. Fun stuff with how Uncle Sam's powers work, and also very sad stuff about how the Nazis are in particular treating the American African population, or American black population, or however we should call it. But that gives a grim edge, a real reminder of how horrifying fascism taking over your country could be. So, yeah. And also real cool stuff with Adolf Hitler Jr.'s son, so Adolf Hitler's grandson, and what's he called? The human bomb or the human explosive? I forget. So Yeah, this still continues to be a really strong book. Not a big fan of that cover either. Who is the traitor? And I think we find out on the last page who the traitor is. Or do we? Or is someone about to be turned into a traitor? Maybe no one really is the traitor yet here. So this cover was also kind of gave you the wrong idea of what kind of story we were looking at here. It was really just the next chapter in, our freedom fighters have been looking like they're completely defeated and now still struggling to get back up on their feet, but there's hope. Speaking of hope, so this was the final issue, number 15, I believe, of Skyward. I put it at number 3. It's kind of an epilogue and gives most characters a happy ending, or at least a new beginning, a start in the new phase of this gravity-free world. So I was just really happy to get a happy ending, and there was nothing super nuanced or brilliant. It was just tying up all the knots and giving it characters who might deserve a happy ending. So very cool. I do feel embarrassed. There was one scene where this couple gets together. Now I can't find them. Anyway, it was a gay couple that got together, and I don't even remember their role in the story. It must be from much earlier issues that I've kind of forgot all the details about. Anyhow, if you're going to read Skyward in trades, it's going to have a basic happy ending. And I was happy about that. Some people might want more twists and stuff and might find the ending of Skyward disappointing, maybe. But anyway, Skyward all along felt, even though some bad things happened during the course of it, it felt like a happy comic the whole way to me. Not so happy is The Weatherman. This is a very violent comic book, but it's definitely now with Volume 2, it's definitely entering into a very different phase where we are seeing something very different happening on planet Earth than we expected. I guess I don't want to spoil it too much, and I only can half guess here, but there was this plague which is eventually going to kill everybody on Earth, supposedly, but hasn't killed everybody on Earth yet. And the nature of this plague is not what we initially thought. It makes it even more of a horror movie, but a really cool one. So I'm not even quite sure what to compare this to. The art and the coloring are very spot on. So I was a little reluctant when Weatherman kind of rebooted into this Volume 2, but now I'm all in and I'm really enjoying this. This came in at number 2. It was really hard to choose whether it was number 2 or number 1. I chose Curse Words as my number 1. This is, I don't know how far away we are from the ending, but this is definitely, things are starting to wrap up to a certain extent and then ratchet up to a sort of new level on the last page of this issue. But we get a lot more of Margaret, the koala / platypus / rat, and perhaps other animals. Backstory, it's fully revealed who she is and what her relationship is to other characters. But I know some people are reading this in trades, so I guess I'm going to stay away from that for now anyway. But some really fun, happy moments and a lot of bad stuff. Some more hints about who Syzygy is, the kind of main devil character throughout this series, the leader of the whole world, but still not as many answers as I thought we would get. But so just a really good continuing chapter in a series that I've really had a lot of fun reading. So that's it. DC Comics was kind of bubbling up to the top for me for a while, and now it seems to be bubbling back down. I don't know if it's Year of the Villain or some other things kind of bringing DC down. Marvel books continue to be my kind of surprise of the last 6 months, because before then I think I hadn't read much Marvel maybe since 2013 or so. And whenever I would read Marvel, it would feel like a letdown. And I'd go, oh yeah, now I remember why I stopped reading Marvel. But a number of Marvel books are really holding their own. I was particularly surprised that I liked Guardians of the Galaxy so much. I am going off on vacation. I will be out. I will be on the other coast of the continent for the next 2 weeks, so I won't be picking up my pull at all. Then I'll have the problem of trying to catch up on all my comics. So it'll be at least 2 weeks before I do one of these countdowns. I hope to throw out a few other videos in the meantime, but we'll see how that goes. So I hope you're all well. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Even with just 11 comics, I took over 30 minutes. There's something wrong with that, and yet, I don't know. Enough people enjoy hearing me babble, and I enjoy hearing your comments and watching your videos about similar comics. And so let's all stay in touch.